The heavy oak doors of the grand chamber did not slam. They did not echo with the dramatic flair of a theatrical exit. They simply clicked shut, sealing with a soft, pneumatic hiss. High Counselor Valen watched the doors close, his four mandibles clicking in a rhythm of mild annoyance. The human ambassador, a man named Elias Thorne, was gone. The diplomatic severance was complete. "They will be back by the end of the cycle," Valen said, his voice a smooth, synthesized hum that translated perfectly into the auditory receptors of the 300 species present in the chamber. "Their economy is entirely dependent on our trade routes. They are bluffing." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled delegates. The Galactic Council was a masterpiece of order. For 10,000 years, they had governed 1,000,000 worlds through the Grand Equation, a predictive algorithm that managed everything from resource distribution to planetary defense. It was a system of pure, unadulterated logic. Humanity, with its messy emotions, its unpredictable art, and its chaotic history, had always been a friction point in the equation. When the Council had voted to restrict human expansion into the Perseus Arm, citing statistical probabilities of resource depletion, Thorne had not argued. He had simply stood up, adjusted his suit, and walked out. "Let them sulk," said Sub-Counselor Kalen, a tall, avian species with feathers of shimmering blue. "Without our navigational beacons and our synthetic grain shipments, their colonies will stagnate. We will wait for their petition for re-entry." Valen nodded, turning back to the central holographic projector. The Grand Equation pulsed in the center of the room, a beautiful sphere of flowing blue light. "Update the logistical models." Valen ordered the chamber's artificial intelligence. "Remove human industrial output from the core projections. Reallocate the Perseus Arm mining quotas to the native species." "Processing," the AI chimed. "Warning. Reallocation of Perseus Arm mining quotas requires manual override of automated safety protocols. Human personnel currently manage 70% of deep core extraction." "Override it," Valen said. "The machines can handle it. We do not need the humans." The blue light shifted to a calm, steady green. The Council returned to their business. The age of human interference was over. The galaxy was safe, logical, and perfectly ordered once more. It took exactly 42 hours for the first crack to appear in their perfect world. Valen was in his private sanctum, reviewing the daily efficiency reports, when his aide, a young insectoid named Xyler, entered. Xyler's antennae were twitching in a pattern that indicated high stress. "High Counselor," Xyler clicked, his voice tight. "We have a situation in the Perseus Arm Sector 4. Valen did not look up from his datapad. "A mining dispute? Tell the local governor to enforce the arbitration ruling." "It is not a dispute, sir. It is a silence." Xyler stepped forward, projecting a map of the sector onto Valen's desk. "The deep space sensor buoy network in Sector 4 has gone dark. All 12 buoys. Simultaneously." Valen finally looked up. "A solar flare? A localized magnetic storm." "The atmospheric models show clear space," Xyler replied. "I ran a diagnostic on the buoys. They are not malfunctioning. They are simply gone." "Gone?" "Buoys do not just vanish, Xyler. They are anchored to asteroids. The asteroids are still there, sir, but the buoys are missing. Furthermore, the last telemetry packet received from Buoy 12 before it went dark contained an anomaly." Xyler expanded the data stream. The buoy's mass sensors registered a sudden, massive gravitational spike. The mass increased to the equivalent of a small moon, stayed for exactly 3 seconds, and then dropped to absolute zero. Valen stared at the data. It made no sense. Mass could not simply appear and disappear. It violated the fundamental laws of physics. It is a sensor glitch. The human technicians who maintained that grid were pulled out yesterday. The automated systems are not calibrated for deep core anomalies. Send a diagnostic drone to replace the buoys. Sir, the diagnostic drones require human-coded navigation software to bypass the sector's asteroid density, Xyler pointed out. We locked the humans out of the mainframe this morning. Then have the engineering cast rewrite the code, Valen snapped, his patience fraying. We are not bringing them back because of a broken sensor. Fix it. Xyler bowed and retreated. Valen looked back at his datapad, but the numbers blurred. A small, irrational knot of unease tightened in his stomach. He pushed it aside. The grand equation did not allow for irrationality. By the end of the week, the unease had spread from the High Counselor's stomach to the entire core of the Council. It started with the logistics. The automated mining rigs in the Perseus arm, lacking the human operators who usually manually cleared the jam drills and bypassed the safety limiters, ground to a halt. Production of iridium, a crucial component for the Council's FTL drives, dropped by 80%. Then came the biological crisis. A cargo freighter from the Outer Rim arrived at the agricultural hub of Demeter Prime. The ship's automated health scanners detected a microscopic fungal spore in the cargo hold. The spore was highly contagious and could destroy the planet's wheat-equivalent crops in days. The grand equation processed the threat in a microsecond. The solution was mathematically perfect. Initiate a total, irreversible planetary quarantine. Seal the atmosphere. Lock down all spaceports. Wait for the spore to run out of organic material and die. The estimated time for the spore to die was 90 days. The problem was that Demeter Prime had 40 billion inhabitants. They relied on daily shipments of synthetic protein. If the planet was locked down for 90 days, 3 billion people would starve before the spore died. In the emergency session, the council chambers were a cacophony of panicked clicks, hums, and squawks. "The algorithm is flawless," Valen shouted over the noise. His mandibles flared in agitation. "If we break the quarantine, the spore will spread to the core worlds. We will lose the entire agricultural network." "We cannot let 3 billion starve," countered the delegate from Demeter Prime. "Send in the cleanup crews. Burn the infected zones. Use the heavy environmental suits." "The human cleanup crews are gone," Valen roared back. "Our own species do not have the physical density to wear the heavy suits in the high-gravity zones of the lower atmosphere. The humans did it because they are dense, stubborn, and reckless." "Then override the quarantine." "I cannot override the grand equation." Valen slammed his fist on the podium. "It is the foundation of our society. If we break the logic of the equation for emotional reasons, the entire predictive model collapses. The algorithm dictates quarantine. The quarantine stands." The delegate from Demeter Prime slumped in his seat. The chamber fell into a horrified silence. They were trapped by their own perfect logic. In the corner of the room, Xyler watched the High Counselor. The young aide's antennae were still twitching. He pulled up a hidden file on his datapad. He had been spending his nights digging through the old archived job manifests from the last century. He was looking for a way to replace the human workers. What he was finding was terrifying. Humans were not just the blue-collar workers of the galaxy. They were the shock absorbers. Whenever the grand equation produced a solution that was mathematically perfect but practically impossible, the humans were the ones who went in and broke the rules to make it work. They manually overrode the mining rigs. They wore the heavy suits. They flew ships through unstable hyperspace lanes using gut feelings instead of navigational computers. They were the chaotic grease that kept the perfect, rigid machine of the Council from tearing itself apart. And the Council had just fired them. The breaking point arrived on day 12 of the crisis. Valen was in the Strategic Command Center, watching the holographic map of the galaxy. The red warning lights of Demeter Prime were a constant, bloody reminder of their failure. Riots had broken out on the planet. The quarantine was holding, but the society inside was collapsing. "High Counselor," Xyler said, his voice trembling. "The Perseus Arms Sensor Network. It is not just Sector 4 anymore. Sectors 5, 6, and 7 have gone dark." Valen turned, his 4 eyes wide. "That is a quarter of the Outer Rim. What is causing this? A system-wide computer virus?" "No, sir," Xyler said. He brought up the last telemetry data from the edge of the dead zone. "It is the same anomaly. Massive gravitational spikes. Mass appearing and disappearing. But the scale, sir, the scale is increasing." "Show me," Valen ordered. The hologram shifted. It showed a long-range visual feed from a deep space telescope at the very edge of the dead zone. The image was grainy, distorted by static. But as the computer enhanced it, the image clarified. Valen stopped breathing. Space was not empty. It was filled with shapes. They were massive, jagged, and entirely black. They did not reflect light. They absorbed it. They were moving, but not in a straight line. They shifted and jerked, appearing in one place, and then instantly in another, bypassing the space in between. What are they? Valen whispered. We do not know, Zyler said. They do not match any known biological or mechanical profile. They are emitting a localized field that disrupts our sensors. They are moving toward the core worlds. At their current speed, they will reach the Perseus shipping lanes in 4 days. Launch the Grand Fleet, Valen ordered, his voice suddenly hard. All dreadnoughts, all cruisers, form a defensive line at the edge of the Perseus arm, calculate their intercept trajectory, and fire. Sir, the Grand Equation cannot calculate their trajectory, Zyler said, panic bleeding into his synthesized voice. Their movements do not follow standard physics. They are not accelerating. They are just relocating. The targeting computers cannot lock on. Then fire blindly. Saturate the zone with plasma. Sir, if we fire blindly, we will hit our own sensor buoys and blind the fleet. The equation forbids firing without a positive lock. Valen stared at the screen. The perfect logic of the Council was failing. The Grand Equation was built to fight wars against species that followed the rules of physics. It was built to fight logical enemies. These things were not logical. Cancel the firing order, Valen said, a cold dread washing over him. Recall the fleet to the core worlds. We will defend the capital. The fleet never made it back. The black shapes, which the terrified analysts had dubbed the Null Swarm, did not engage the Council's Grand Fleet in a traditional battle. They simply flowed through it. When the Council dreadnoughts raised their energy shields, the swarm did not batter against them. The creatures shifted their own mass into a state of partial non-existence, phasing directly through the energy barriers. Once inside the shields, they solidified and tore the ships apart from the inside. The battle, if it could be called that, lasted less than an hour. The Grand Fleet, the pride of 1,000,000 worlds, was reduced to drifting, venting wreckage. The Null Swarm did not stop to scavenge. They did not send demands. They simply continued their relentless, jerky advance toward the core worlds. In the command center, Valen watched the tactical feed. The blue dots representing his ships were winking out by the dozens. They are ignoring our hails, Zyler reported, his voice hollow. They are ignoring our warning shots. They do not care about our logic. They do not care about the Grand Equation. Activate the planetary shield, Valen said. He felt incredibly old. Activate the Aegis grid around the capital. If they want the core, they will have to break through the perfect barrier. The Aegis grid was the ultimate achievement of Council engineering. It was a multi-layered shield of hard light and gravity manipulation. It was mathematically impenetrable. It calculated the exact frequency and mass of any incoming projectile and adjusted its density to perfectly deflect it. It was a wall of pure mathematics. The Null Swarm reached the orbit of the capital world. Valen watched the main screen. The black shapes swarmed around the planet, a cloud of absolute darkness against the stars. Shields holding at 100%, the AI announced calmly. No kinetic impacts detected. No energy signatures detected. They aren't attacking, Zyler said, confused. The swarm stopped moving. They formed a perfect, massive ring around the planet. Then they began to vibrate. It was a low, subsonic frequency that bypassed the vacuum of space and rattled the very bones of the Council members in the command center. The hard light shield began to ripple. Warning, the AI chimed, its voice losing its calm cadence. Shield integrity failing. The incoming frequency is altering the local gravitational constant. The shield's mathematical foundation is being destabilized. Compensate, Valen yelled. Recalculate the gravitational constants. Recalculating. Error. The incoming frequency is shifting too rapidly. It is changing every microsecond. The equation cannot predict the next shift. The blue light of the Aegis grid flickered. The perfect mathematical barrier was shattering because the enemy was changing the rules of reality faster than the computer could calculate them. With a sound like tearing metal, the shield collapsed. The command center plunged into emergency red lighting. Valen gripped the edge of the console. The perfect society he had dedicated his life to was ending. The logic had failed. The math had failed. "High Counselor," Xyler said softly. "There is only one option left." Valen closed his eyes. He knew what the young aide was going to say. It was the only option. It was the only species in the galaxy that did not rely on the grand equation. The only species that thrived in the messy, unpredictable, chaotic dark. "Open a channel," Valen whispered. "Sir, we severed the diplomatic ties. The channel is closed." "Open it," Valen said, his voice rising. "Open the emergency soul channel. Bypass the mainframe. Use the old analog relays. Do it now." The screen in the command center flickered. The static cleared, revealing a face. It was Admiral Vance. He was not wearing a ceremonial uniform. He was wearing a grease-stained flight suit. He was sitting in a dimly lit room, holding a ceramic mug of coffee. He looked entirely unbothered. "High Counselor Valen," Vance said, taking a slow sip from his mug. "To what do we owe the pleasure? I thought you were busy running a perfect society." Valen swallowed his pride. It tasted like ash. "Admiral Vance, we are under attack. An unknown hostile force has breached the Perseus Arm and destroyed the Grand Fleet. They are currently in orbit around the capital. Our shields have fallen. We require immediate military assistance." Vance set his mug down. He leaned forward, his eyes cold and hard. "You severed diplomatic relations, Counselor. You locked us out of your mainframe. You called us a chaotic, messy, inferior species. You told us to leave." "I was wrong," Valen said. The words felt like physical blows. "The grand equation cannot handle this enemy. They do not follow the rules of physics. They shift mass. They alter gravity. Our computers cannot predict them. We are going to die, Admiral. Billions will die." Vance was silent for a long moment. He looked off-screen, speaking to someone out of frame. "Yeah, I see them on the long-range scanners. Ugly bastards, aren't they?" He looked back at Valen. "You cut the cord, Counselor. You said we were too messy for your perfect society. Why should we risk our people to save a civilization that thinks we are a glitch in their math?" "Because if we fall, you are next," Valen said. "These things do not stop. They will consume the core, and then they will move to the outer rim. They will eat your worlds, too. We are the shield, Admiral. But you are the sword. Please." Vance stared at him. The silence stretched, heavy and suffocating. Xyler held his breath. "Stand by," Vance said finally. The screen went black. Valen let out a shaky breath. "They are coming," he told Xyler. "Prepare the landing zones for human ships." "Sir," Xyler said, looking at his datapad. "The long-range sensors are picking up multiple FTL signatures. They are dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the orbit. Put it on the main screen." The screen flickered to life. Valen expected to see the sleek, elegant ships of the human military. He expected to see the beautiful, sweeping curves of human design that he had always secretly admired. What he saw made his mandibles drop. The ships that dropped out of hyperspace were monstrous. They were blocky, ugly, and scarred. They looked like flying bricks. There were no energy shields glowing around them. There were no elegant weapon arrays. They were retrofitted mining vessels. They were massive asteroid tuggers. They were industrial haulers, their cargo bays welded shut and bristling with crude, brutal kinetic cannons. They were ugly, brutal, and entirely devoid of grace. "Are those cargo ships?" Xyler asked, horrified. "They are human ships," Valen corrected. The human fleet did not form a neat, mathematical defensive line. They scattered. They broke formation. They moved with a chaotic, jerky aggression that mirrored the null swarm. "Admiral Vance is hailing us," Xyler said. "Put him through." Vance appeared on the screen. He was wearing a helmet now. "Counselor, you might want to look away." This is going to be messy. The human fleet engaged. They did not use targeting computers. They did not calculate trajectories. They used brute force and terrifying recklessness. A massive human asteroid tug fired its main engines, accelerating to a fraction of the speed of light, and rammed directly into a cluster of the null swarm. The impact shattered the tug, but the kinetic force pulverized the black shapes, turning them into dust. Human mining ships deployed their heavy industrial lasers, not to cut rock, but to superheat the asteroids around them, turning the space around the capital into a blinding, chaotic storm of molten shrapnel. The null swarm tried to phase through the debris, but the sheer, unpredictable volume of the molten rock overwhelmed their shifting abilities. The humans were not fighting with logic. They were fighting with chaos. They were matching the swarm's unpredictability with their own brand of beautiful, terrifying madness. Vance's flagship, a heavily modified dreadnought named the Iron Stubborn, flew directly into the center of the swarm. It did not raise shields. Instead, it activated its FTL drive while still in real space. Warning, the Council AI chimed. Activating an FTL drive within a gravity well will cause a localized spatial rupture. It is mathematically suicidal. The Iron Stubborn vanished, reappearing 3 seconds later directly on top of the largest null swarm cluster. The spatial rupture tore a hole in reality, a massive gravitational shockwave that crushed the black shapes into nothingness. It was brutal. It was reckless. It was entirely against every rule of the grand equation. And it was working. The null swarm, faced with an enemy that was just as chaotic, just as unpredictable, and entirely willing to break the laws of physics to win, began to falter. They could not predict the human tactics because the humans were not using tactics. They were just throwing everything they had at the wall and seeing what stuck. Within 2 hours, the sky above the capital was clear. The null swarm was gone, reduced to a faint cloud of cosmic dust. The human fleet, battered, leaking atmosphere, and missing several ships, formed up outside the planet. They did not look like a victorious armada. They looked like a bar fight that had spilled out into the street. The command center was dead silent. The council members stared at the screen, their minds struggling to process what they had just witnessed. The perfect logic of their civilization had been saved by the ultimate expression of chaos. "Admiral Vance," Valen said, his voice quiet. "You saved us." "We did the job," Vance replied, wiping a smear of grease from his cheek. "That is what we do. We clean up the messes your math can't handle." Valen straightened his robes. He had to fix this. He had to bring humanity back into the fold. He had to offer them a seat on the council. He had to make them equals. "Admiral, I formally apologize for the council's actions," Valen said. "We were blind. We relied too heavily on the equation and failed to see the value of your unique approach. I am prepared to offer humanity a permanent seat on the High Council. We will rewrite the trade agreements. We will remove the restrictions on the Perseus arm. We want you to rejoin us." Vance laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "A seat on the council?" Vance shook his head. "Counselor, you misunderstand the situation. We don't want a seat on your council. Your council is a bureaucracy. It is slow, it is rigid, and it is entirely useless when the universe decides to stop making sense." "Then what do you want?" Valen asked. "Name your price. We will give you whatever you need." "We don't need anything from you," Vance said. "But we are willing to offer you a service." Vance tapped a button off-screen. A document appeared on Valen's datapad. It was a contract. "Humanity is no longer a member of the Galactic Council," Vance said. "As of today, we are an independent, private crisis management contractor. You have a galaxy full of problems that your perfect math can't solve. Bioplagues, navigational collapses, extragalactic horrors. We will solve them for you." Valen read the contract. His eyes widened. "The fees? Admiral, these prices are extortionate. You are asking for a percentage of the core world's total industrial output. You are asking for exclusive mining rights to the entire Outer Rim. We are charging market rate for high-risk, high-complexity problem-solving," Vance replied smoothly. You can pay us, or you can try to handle the next null swarm with your grand equation. Your choice. Valen looked at the contract. He looked at the battered, ugly human ships outside his window. He realized, with a profound and terrifying clarity, that the balance of power in the galaxy had just shifted. Humanity was not going to rule the Council. They were going to own it. They were going to be the landlords, the fixers, the untouchable monopoly on survival. The Council would still sit in their grand chamber and debate logic, but they would do it at the pleasure of the humans, paying their rent in raw resources and gratitude. If we sign this, Valen said slowly, what happens to the diplomatic relations? Diplomacy is for species that share a galaxy and play by the same rules, Vance said. You proved you don't play by our rules, and we don't play by yours. We are just business partners now, Counselor. Strictly professional. Valen looked at Xyler. The young aide gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. It was the only choice they had. Valen pressed his thumb to the datapad, signing the Soul Accords. Contract accepted, Vance said. Our engineers will be down on the surface in an hour to fix your planetary shield. Tell your tech priests to stay out of the way. They're going to use duct tape and percussive maintenance, and it is going to look ugly. Understood, Valen said. Good day, Counselor, Vance said. The screen went black. Valen stood in the center of the grand chamber. The holographic projector in the middle of the room flickered back to life. The grand equation pulsed, a beautiful sphere of flowing blue light. It was perfect. It was logical. It was entirely useless. Valen reached out and turned the projector off. Xyler, Valen said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. Yes, High Counselor. Cancel the reallocation of the Perseus arm mining quotas. Send a message to the human contractors. Tell them we need their heavy drills back online by tomorrow. Right away, sir. Valen walked toward the heavy oak doors of the chamber. They hissed open for him. He looked out at the grand, sweeping architecture of the Council Capital. It looked different now. It no longer looked like a monument to perfect order. It looked like a client's office. The age of perfect logic was dead. The age of human chaos had begun. And for the first time in his long life, Valen found himself looking forward to the mess.